would be me, Raven Chamberlain.
Okay. And for the defense, who will make opening statement?
I will, Your Honor. Caitlin Clint.
Okay, great. Just as a reminder, if you're not speaking, you're welcome to have your video on unless we start to have glitching because of bandwidth issues. Right now it looks fine, but do turn your microphone off. If you start to speak and I don't see if I see you speaking and don't hear you, I'll ask you to turn your microphone back on and remind you. I will ask the scoring panelists to just recognize that we all do that from time to time. I'm sure you will. So with that, again, we'll just wait for the all clear, and then we'll get started. Oh, I do have one other issue with the timing and the video. If you are a timekeeper and you intend to give hand signals as to time remaining, please keep your video on while you're keeping time.
All right, we are good to start.
Okay, so for this first part, if I could get everyone who has, all of the team members who have a video to turn them back on just for the moment. Oh, for both plaintiff and defense. Okay, just you've probably seen this before, but if you could all raise your right hands, I'm going to administer the oath of the competition. Team members, do you promise that the presentation you are about to give will faithfully and truthfully conform to the facts and rules of the mock trial competition? All right, seeing all affirmative nods and no shakes of the head negative. Witnesses, do you promise that the testimony you're about to give will faithfully and truthfully conform to your witness statements, that you will not add material facts or opinions which are not contained in the case problem, and that you will follow the rules and procedures of the mock trial competition? All right, seeing all affirmative nods and no negative indications, I'll accept that as accepting your oaths. And then scoring panelists, please raise your right hands. Do you promise to adjudicate the mock trial competition as fairly and objectively as possible in accordance with the facts, procedures, and rules of the mock trial competition?
I do.
All right, thank you very much. Oscar, are you the timekeeper for the defense?
Yes.
Excellent. If you could, I don't know if you heard me earlier, when you are keeping time, if you are giving hand signals, please turn your video on. And
I won't be doing any hand signals today, but thank you.
All right, great. Well, let me ask you then, how will you advise that time is up?
I will put it into the chat. Is that all right?
Do all of your team members know that that's how you're going to do that?
Yes.
Okay, and that's all right with me. So plaintiff's counsel, are you ready to proceed?
Your Honor, we have a few pretrial matters.
All right.
We asked that co-counsel may be able to screen share exhibits.
That's fine.
We asked that we may pause the clock for any technological issues.
That's fine.
We asked that the jury has all jury instructions and stipulated facts.
Do you want the jury to have jury instructions before the trial or after closing arguments?
During the trial, Your Honor.
Is that stipulated between the parties?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, then that's fine.
And the court has all prior rulings on this matter.
I do.
Ready. And Your Honor, we are all competing from the same building, so we just ask that you give us a small amount of time in between rounds for us to briefly change the name on the screen and to transition in between computers.
We will make that accommodation. That's fine. Just advise me and the scoring panelists when you need to do that so that we'll know that that's what's happening, please.
And I also ask that the plaintiff timekeeper may be allowed to post time in the chat.
That's fine, so long as it's posted to everyone and not only to your team members.
That will, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right. Anything from the defense?
Just that our timekeeper can share exhibits instead of co-counsel.
So long as the timekeeper is sharing exhibits at the direction of the counsel who is, of the attorney who is either directing the examination, doing the cross-examination, or in closing using demonstrative exhibits, then that's fine.
Thank you, Your Honor. That is all.
All right. And with that, are there any other stipulations or pretrial matters to address?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. Plaintiff, are you ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
And defense counsel, are you ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Opening statements.
And before I begin, Your Honor, I just want to make sure my timekeeper is ready.
He is.
Am I good to begin?
You are.
Profits over people. Ladies and gentlemen, you are here today because of Lush Fertilizer and their persistent need to put their own profits over the health and wellness of people. Young, smart, talented people like Dakota Wires. Now, you're going to hear from Dakota Wires herself today. Dakota is now a 20-year-old woman enduring the detrimental effects of cancer, more specifically non-Hodgkin lymphoma. Cancer has taken so much away from Dakota, but one of the largest things it has taken away is her ability to play piano. Dakota's ability to play piano started out as a hobby where she would play with her grandfather, but quickly excelled into a dream and a passion. Today, you will hear how a young girl's dreams were torn away by Lush Fertilizer and their need to put their profits over people. Now, Lush Fertilizer, like its name suggests, makes fertilizer. They have this new, amazing, game-changing product that includes an ingredient called Drufo. Now, today, Lush is going to try to tell you how amazing Drufo is, but ladies and gentlemen, it is a possible carcinogen. You will hear the story of Lush Fertilizer and Dakota Wires through 6 witnesses today, 3 from the plaintiff and 3 from the defense. First, the plaintiff will call our 3 witnesses, Dr. Casey Rogers, Carson Durst, and finally Dakota Wires. Dr. Casey Rogers is a current professor in horticulture and entomology at the University of California, Berkeley. He will tell you how much research he has done and how Drufo is a possible carcinogen. Dr. Casey Rogers will also show you how Lush is continuously putting their profits over their people through not getting rid of the possible carcinogens in Drufo. Dr. Casey Rogers will also tell you how Dakota was exposed to Drufo almost daily, making it more likely than not that this is where she got her cancer. Next, Carson Durst will be called to the stand. Carson Durst will tell you their relationship with Blake Doncourt, the current CEO of Lush, and how it quickly deteriorated after they started working for them at Lush Fertilizer. Carson will tell you of a process called Drufo, a process called baking, which could have gotten rid of any carcinogens in Drufo, but this process never happened. Carson will show you how Lush continues to put their profits over their people through not baking Drufo. Last, Dakota Wires will be called. Dakota will tell you how she worked at Haven Landscaping for a number of years and used Lush Fertilizer all throughout. Dakota will also tell you of her dreams of piano, and now she has an undetermined future due to Lush Fertilizer and their need to put their profits over people. Next, defense will call their 3 witnesses, Dr. Devin Williams, Skylar Wires, and Blake Doncourt. Dr. Devin Williams is a paid employee of Lush Fertilizer, showing their possible financial bias in today's case. They are putting their own profits over people like Dakota Wires. Skylar Wires is Dakota's estranged twin, showing another possible bias in today's case. They are also a writer for a magazine called The Rationalist. They will tell you of their research on Drufo, but ladies and gentlemen, they only researched Drufo for 1 year. Skylar Wires will show you how they are putting their own profits over the health and wellness of their twin Dakota. Blake Doncourt, the current CEO of Lush, will tell you how they never heard of any concerns regarding Drufo, but ladies and gentlemen, they will admit to some risks that could have been there. They will also tell you how they could have baked Drufo, but they made the choice not to.
Blake Doncourt is putting their own profits over people like Dakota. Now, the plaintiff has to prove to you by the preponderance of the evidence that Lush Fertilizer is negligent. And that is what we are here to do. We ask you to see how Lush Fertilizer continues to put their profits over people like Dakota Wires. Thank you.
Thank you. Does the defense want to make an opening statement?
Yes, Your Honor.
Proceed when ready.
Your Honor, members of the jury and opposing counsel, may it please the court. My name is Caitlin Clint, and I represent Lush Fertilizer, the defendant in this case. Ladies and gentlemen, irresponsibility has grave consequences. In this case, the plaintiff was irresponsible when they chose to be comfortable by neglecting the proper precautions they knew they should have taken when dealing with Drufo. Havens as a company was irresponsible when they did not require their employees to specifically follow the safety guidelines on Lush's label. The plaintiff, Dakota Weirs, has brought forth a negligence claim against my client. Dakota has been diagnosed with non-Hodgkin lymphoma, a horrible condition. And while the defense offers sympathy for what has happened to Dakota, we disagree with Dakota's claim. Dakota believes that 1, Lush Fertilizer contains a chemical bonding agent called Drufo. 2, Lush Fertilizer knew or should have known that Drufo causes non-Hodgkin lymphoma. And 3, Lush's failure to properly warn users about the safety of its product is the sole cause of Dakota's cancer. While the defense agrees with the first claim, we vehemently deny the other 2. However, at the end of this trial, once you have heard all the evidence, it will be apparent that a verdict of not liable is the only appropriate verdict. The defense denies that Drufo causes non-Hodgkin cancer. We counter that even if it does, which we deny, Dakota Weirs was also negligent for failing to wear protective clothing and a respirator while using our product. There's no proof that the chemical from our fertilizer caused cancer, but even so, Dakota had the responsibility to use reasonable care when working with our fertilizer. When you hear all the evidence presented to you today, I want you to keep 2 main things in mind. 1, the plaintiff was fully aware of the precautions they should have taken when working with a fertilizer like Lush. And 2, Drufo is a revolutionary product that is far better for the planet and for people than other fertilizers on the market. Today, you will hear from 3 of the plaintiff's witnesses. You will hear from the plaintiff himself, Dakota Weirs, the lead product developer for Terrace Greenery, Carson Durst, and a professor at UC Berkeley, Dr. Casey Rogers. Dakota Weirs will testify that the sole cause of their non-Hodgkin lymphoma is due to the use of Lush fertilizer, even though they used other lawn chemicals and fertilizers. Dakota will admit that they were told to cover their face and wear long clothes when working with the chemicals. Dakota chose comfortability when they were specifically told to wear proper clothing. Dakota knew that they should take proper precautions and yet still chose to put themselves in harm's way. Carson Durst will testify that they worked their way fast up within Lush. Lush hired Carson right after college at ASU. You will hear that Carson got a lot of complaints and had to go on a performance improvement plan or probationary status. When you hear what Carson will say on the stand, I want you to ask yourself this question. Is Carson actually qualified, or was it because of the relationship with the Doncourts? Dr. Casey Rogers will testify for the first time as an expert witness. You will hear about a study they conducted that to them proves that Drufo is unsafe and is what caused the plaintiff's cancer. However, you'll come to hear that the study has never been published in a scholarly article, has never been peer-reviewed, and has never been replicated. You will hear that this study is problematic because of its small sample size that compares apples to oranges. Then you will hear from our 3 witnesses. First, Skylar Weirs. From Skylar, you will hear that Drufo is undoubtedly good for the environment. Drufo does not need to be applied as often as other fertilizers, meaning there's less nitrogen penetration and fewer carcinogenic pesticides. Next, you will hear from Blake Doncourt. From Blake, you will hear how Carson's claim about the safety of Drufo didn't come up until Carson was fired and started working for Terrace Greenery, Lush's biggest competitor. You will hear how Carson could have brought up those claims when he was working for Lush, and it was actually his job to do that. Last, you will hear from Dr. Devin Williams. From Dr. Devin Williams, you will hear that Drufo users have no higher risk of non-Hodgkin lymphoma than users of other fertilizers. You will hear that not only is Drufo safe, but Drufo is also beneficial to the environment and its users. Ladies and gentlemen, irresponsibility has grave consequences. In this case, the plaintiff was irresponsible when they chose to be comfortable instead of taking the proper precautions they knew they should have taken when dealing with Drufo. Also, the employer had the responsibility of enforcing the proper safety precautions as prescribed. The plaintiff has the responsibility to prove beyond a preponderance of evidence. A verdict of not liable is the only appropriate verdict. Thank you.
Okay, does the plaintiff have a witness?
Yes, Your Honor. The plaintiff calls Dr. Casey Rogers to the stand.
All right, Dr. Casey, or Dr. Rogers, excuse me.
And before we begin, I would just like to confirm with my timekeepers that they're ready. Okay, awesome. Please state your name and spell the last for the record.
Of course, Dr. Casey Rogers, Rogers.
And who are you, Dr. Rogers?
Well, that's a bit of a deep question, Miss Yet, I must admit. I'd say first and foremost, I'm curious. I spent years studying at Colorado State University, moving on to UC Berkeley, diving through data and understanding the results of that data. And even my work largely has to do with that same curiosity, finding out the knowledge behind things.
So you touched on it briefly, but can you tell me a little bit more about your education?
Absolutely. As I said, I started off getting my bachelor's of science from the Colorado State University in agriculture and chemistry. And after that point, a lot of long nights of studying and going through data, I earned my PhD from the University of California, Berkeley, in the areas of horticulture and entomology.
Thank you. What's your work background look like?
Well, I've done a lot of work in my time. Most notably, I spent a long series of years working for my apologies, an undisclosed chemical company. I would go through different pieces of classified data that they wanted me to look through. I would analyze that data, put it into reports, and then later submit it to my superiors of that job.
So what do you do for work now?
Well, currently I work as a professor still at UC Berkeley. I teach a variety of different classes on all of the things that I've learned over the years, and it's really good to be able to touch kids' hearts.
Do you have any interest in toxicology at all?
Absolutely. I'd say that two of my biggest interests in the entire area of research are long-term exposure to chemicals. That's a pillar of toxicology in general. And then, of course, the metabolism of toxicants. That's why I work currently at a toxicology lab at Berkeley.
Your Honor, now under Rule 702, I ask that Dr. Rogers be admitted in as an expert in agriculture and toxicology.
Vince, any comment?
Yes, Your Honor, permission to perform a brief voir dire.
A brief one, yes.
So, Doctor, you have a Bachelor of Science degree in agriculture and chemistry, correct?
I do.
And you don't have any sort of medical degree or experience as a doctor, correct?
Well, of course, the medical properties of different chemicals, but no, I'm not an MD.
And so you've been a research analyst, correct?
A research analyst, a professor going through studies. I've had a lot of different hats.
And so your experience and job are all in fields of agriculture, chemistry, and entomology, correct?
No, I work currently at a toxicology lab.
So, but you've no sort of experience with cancer, correct?
Well, that toxicology lab, that has a lot to do with understanding cancer as it relates to toxicants.
So could you please tell me what the broad field of agriculture is?
Just define agriculture for you?
Sure.
Of course. Well, there's a variety of different types of things that would fall under agriculture. First and foremost, there's agriculture proper. It's a broad term that largely just means the growing of plants. There's horticulture. That's things like botany, growing individual gardens, things like flower growing. There's a field called permaculture, which is similar to agriculture, but focused on sustainability. It's a very broad label. It has a lot of different things within it.
Thank you. That's all. Your Honor, I move to have Dr. Casey Rogers accepted in all of his stipulated fields, but not allowed to testify to any sort of specific cancers or the science behind them.
I think that Let me ask plaintiff's counsel, what specifically are you moving admission as an expert?
I'm moving that this witness be admitted in agriculture and toxicology. And Your Honor, I would just like to note that under the toxicology umbrella, this witness already mentioned metabolism of toxins and prolonged exposure to chemicals, which could entail some learning about the human body and some cancers.
I'm going to allow the witness to testify as an expert as moved by the plaintiff. Counsel, if you have, Mr. Dujic, if you have any objections or if you believe that he's unqualified, then I'll let you address that on cross-examination.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. So Dr. Rogers, can you talk to me more about some of the different studies that you've done? I know you mentioned that briefly.
Sure. I mean, I've done a lot of them. I'd say most recently, the studies that I've published were in 2019. I reviewed all the EU's data on human exposure to Drufo, and I looked at weed resistance to the fertilizer. But I think most importantly is a study I wrapped up just a couple years back that was more in the field. It was looking at tangible effects of people who use Drufo, any medical downsides of the use of the product, just out in the field collecting that data by hand.
Thank you. So can we just back up a little bit? What is Drufo?
Well, that's a very good question. Drufo is a bonding agent that's used in lush fertilizers products, and it mostly just has the job of keeping that product preserved and intact over a long period of time.
So what originally piqued your interest in Drufo?
Well, gosh, it's definitely been a while since then. I think as soon as that product first came on the market, I was worried about Drufo. You know, it had improper testing in a very real way. And with my experience looking at data, especially with advisory boards and companies, I can tell when a product is adequately tested or not. And even then, in the years since then, I was hearing these different reports about negative side effects of Drufo. And that definitely piqued my interest.
So tell me more about the study that you did on it.
Of course. In this study, we had three major groups, one of which were those who were exposed daily to the toxicant, one of which were those who were only exposed occasionally, and then a control group with no exposure to the product at all.
So what were the official results, if you will, of your study?
Well, in my expert opinion, those results showed very conclusively that Drufo has a heavy correlation with cancer, most notably non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. The group with daily exposure to that product were 10 times as likely as our control group to contract the condition. And those with only occasional exposure were still twice as likely as our control group to contract that same condition.
So what does this tell us about Drufo as a whole?
Well, in my expert opinion, there's a high degree of medical probability that Drufo is a carcinogen.
And what is a carcinogen?
Oh, of course. Sorry, I'm used to talking with other scientists a lot of the time. A carcinogen is just anything that could cause cancer in humans.
Okay, and we'll move on a little bit. How is a person exposed to Drufo?
Of course, there are two major routes of exposure for the product, one of which is through absorption, just getting it on your skin. It'll go in through your skin and into your bloodstream. The other one would be breathing in Drufo. It'll go into your lungs and once again get into your bloodstream from there.
How can a person prevent this harmful exposure to Drufo?
Well, gosh, first and foremost, I'd say the one way to prevent exposure to a toxin is to stop people from being able to buy it. If Drufo wasn't on the market, people wouldn't be being exposed to it on the daily. But those who are already using it in their job should ideally wear a respirator or some kind of long clothing to prevent that exposure.
Thank you. We'll move on just a little bit. Did you do any research about this case prior to today?
Oh, absolutely. I've poured through a lot of research on this case. Most notably, I looked through all of Dakota Weir's medical and work records from the time around their diagnosis.
Okay, so moving back to your study, based off of that, which of the three groups did Dakota fall into?
Well, those groups have a lot of different people in them, but I think Dakota squarely fits into that third group. Daily exposure to the product is the main feature that differentiated them, and Dakota had that daily exposure, especially without a lot of protective equipment being used.
Thank you. And moving back to your study a little bit, you mentioned non-Hodgkin lymphoma. What were some of the symptoms of the people who developed non-Hodgkin lymphoma?
Well, gosh, I mean, there were a lot of different symptoms correlated with the disease. And at this point, I think it becomes a lot less of an interesting scientific romp and a lot more of understanding how difficult it is to have it. You know, those with exposure to Drufo who would contract non-Hodgkin's lymphoma in my study exhibited symptoms like constant night sweats, long ongoing fevers, lots of pain, issues with loss of
Objection, Your Honor?
appetite.
Yes, you have an objection?
Outside of the scope of the witness, he's testifying to effects of cancer, which he's not an expert in.
Response?
Your Honor, this witness is simply testifying to what they observed during their study. And as I mentioned briefly earlier, this does fall under that umbrella term of toxicology.
So I think that the effects of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma go beyond the scope of an expert in toxicology and into questions of symptoms of cancer, which I think is more specifically and more properly reserved to a medical professional, an MD. So I'll sustain the objection.
Okay, we'll move on. So based only on what you did within your study and what you reviewed of Dakota Wires, what can you conclude about Drufo?
In my expert opinion, Drufo caused the cancer that Dakota Wires is currently suffering through.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions at this time.
All right. Cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, and am I pronouncing your last name correctly, Bujic?
That's perfect.
All right, good.
Doctor, this is your first time testifying as an expert witness, correct?
It is. I felt like this was pressing enough to jump into a new field.
And could you please turn your attention to Exhibit 7?
Yeah, let me pull that up for a second.
And could we please have that screen shared?
Yep, I have that with me now.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Thank you. So, Doctor, is this a fair and accurate representation of your publications?
It is, yes.
And thank you. Sorry. Your Honor, I move to admit Exhibit 7 as evidence.
Objection?
Yes, Your Honor. I object on the grounds of hearsay.
Response?
Your Honor, I'm simply just trying to bring in what Casey Rogers has researched in the past.
Your
So,
Honor,
Overruled. Submitted.
thank you. So this is a list of your published work, correct?
It is.
And you say that you've conducted a long-term study on the long-term health effects of prolonged exposure to potentially harmful substances, including this.
Absolutely. I spent a couple years going over that data and reviewing my study. Yes.
So in this study, you decided to compare a control group of people to a group who had never been exposed to Drufo, and a group of people working with Drufo on occasion. Is that correct?
Yeah, you could say that.
And you chose to compare farm laborers versus casual gardeners versus people who don't do any of those things, correct?
Oh, my groups were a bit broader than that. I apologize if I wasn't very specific during my direct. That third group is anyone with daily exposure to the product. Yes, it included people like farm laborers, but also people like landscape workers or very avid gardeners. Anyone with that daily exposure falls into that third group, and we had a lot of different people.
But those are pretty good baseline examples of the three groups you had, right?
They are examples from them. I wouldn't say they represent the massive amount of people that I studied.
Okay, but so those people who wouldn't you agree that people who are laborers and gardeners and neither of those things live relatively different lives, correct?
Well, it depends. I'm sure a lot of people have similar interests across those massive groups, but yes, we studied a variety of different people.
And those with different lifestyles comes different environmental and exposures, right?
Of course, people are exposed to different things.
But even though that you knew you couldn't compare people who lived completely different lives and were exposed to different chemicals, you still chose to compare these three groups, right?
Oh, you absolutely can compare groups who live completely different lives. There's an interesting idea where you have to have a wide variety of different data that you're looking at so that your common ground can be proven to be the one uniting characteristic. If the people were living the exact same life every time, we would know that there were other unified characteristics that could skew the data. But if they're all living different lives, all of those environmental exposures only apply to one of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of data points.
Okay,
so you only get a tiny bit of your data skewed.
So, but looking at, as we saw earlier in Exhibit 7, the study that you conducted has never been peer reviewed. Yes or no?
It was not peer reviewed, no.
And it hasn't been replicated?
It has not been replicated.
And it has not been published in any sort of scientific journal, right?
No, it hasn't made it through the publishing process yet.
And just to clarify, this is the first time that in this case that anyone has heard of this study, correct?
I'm sorry, what do you mean by that?
Let me rephrase. This case is the first time that this study has really made a large scale appearance, correct?
Well, obviously, I've shown it to other scientists and those who were involved in the study. Many people have already seen and given me personal feedback, but it hasn't made it through peer review. No,
that wasn't my question, though. This is the first time that this has made a large scale appearance to a large audience of people.
I think that's too subjective for me to really talk about. I don't know what counts as a large audience or not.
Okay, but would you say that this is a large scale audience?
I mean, it depends. If a lot of people notice this case, it gets picked up by news reports, sure, it could reach a broader audience. But if it doesn't, it won't. I can't predict the future.
Okay, but this study of yours is the groundwork of the plaintiff's case, correct?
Well, I'm not a lawyer. I couldn't speak to the groundwork of the plaintiff's case.
But it's a pretty large piece.
Well, I would hope so. I think it's very conclusive. But like I said, I'm not a lawyer.
Thank you. No further questions.
Ms. Counsel, do you have any redirect? Is it Ms.
Yes.
Yet? Yep,
Yes. Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Rogers, why was your study never peer reviewed?
Well, it's actually going through that process currently. I've submitted it to a couple areas, but it's a very long process. A lot of eyes have to get through that study very meticulously. And because of the scale and long term of the study, it's going to take more time than something like a review of evidence, which got published in 2019.
And similarly, why was it never published?
Well, like I said, the publishing process also takes a massive amount of time. And similarly, I think it's important to make sure that those harmed by Drufo get a first look at the study that could prove that.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have no further questions.
Counsel, do you have any recross based solely on redirect?
No, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. All right, Dr. Rogers, you are excused. I remind you that if you're recalled, you will remain under oath. Does the counsel for the plaintiff have any other witnesses?
Yes, Your Honor. If I could just have one moment to change my name.
Of course. And as a reminder, this won't count against time. Will not count against time.
I am ready, just checking to make sure my witness is ready.
Yes, Ms. Chamberlain, I'm ready to go.
And timekeepers.
If the timekeepers are ready, is counsel for defense on and ready?
I'm sorry. Is this Ms. Durst? Who's testifying right now?
Yes.
Okay, then yes, sorry, I'm ready.
You may proceed.
Thank you. Please state your name and spell your last for the record.
Sure, my name is Carson Durst, and Durst is spelled D-U-R-S-T.
Are you currently employed, Ms. Durst?
I am, yes. I currently work with Terra's Greenery.
About how long have you worked at Terra's?
I began my employment there in 2006, and given that it's 2022 now, it's been about 16 years.
What's your position there?
I am our lead product developer, which essentially means that I run our research and development team.
Did you work in anywhere prior to Terrace Greenery?
Yes, actually, in fact, directly prior to working for Terrace Greenery, I worked for Lush Fertilizer.
About how long did you work at Lush?
I was hired as an intern in the summer of 2003 and then eventually left near the end of 2006. So 3.5 years.
What was your position there?
I began as an intern, stayed in that role for about 3 months, and then was promoted to a full-time position on the research and development team for the rest of my time with the company.
Did you work on any specific products while you were at Lush?
I did, yes. Lush was actually in the process of developing the ingredient Drufo during my time at Lush Fertilizer, and so I worked quite extensively on the research and development of the ingredient.
And what is Drufo?
Drufo is a chemical bonding agent created internally by Lush, which is added to most of their fertilizer products, and is what they say is what makes their fertilizer so revolutionary.
Were there any downfalls of Drufo?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say there still are. Drufo has been found to be potentially carcinogenic or potentially cancer causing. And so I would say that was and absolutely still is an issue with it.
How do you know about these downfalls?
I originally heard about them through a study that I found on a research assignment during my time at Lush.
And could you expand on that a little bit more?
Sure, yes. The study that I came across was studying the specific effects of one component of Drufo on rats. It was conducted by a lab in England, and they were specifically looking for the impacts of that compound, and they found that it was potentially carcinogenic.
Did you ever receive any communications regarding the downfalls of Drufo or this study?
I did, yes. Once I found this study, it was pretty typical for employees to write down findings of research in our notebooks. Those notebooks were reviewed by our managers and then collected to create periodic reports, which went up to senior management. Not long after I wrote down the findings of this study in my notebook, I heard from my manager, Jerry Langley, that Lush would be conducting an internal study looking for carcinogenic qualities in Drufo in humans.
Objection, Your Honor. This is a narrative answer.
Do you have a response?
Yes, Your Honor. My witness was still within the grounds of the question, so I do not believe that this was narrative.
All right. I will overrule the objection this time, but I will ask the witness to be mindful of not giving narrative answers and rather a little bit more directly answering the question that's asked. But it's overruled at this point in time, just with that caveat.
Now, Ms. Durst, if you could just continue, or if you were done.
Yeah, Ms. Chamberlain, I actually was just, I had just wrapped up. Would you like me to repeat any of my answer? Or?
No, I think I'm okay. And if I could have my co-counsel screen share Exhibit 4. Should be up in just one moment. And can you see this, Ms. Durst?
I can see what I believe is the top part of it. Could you have your co-counsel scroll down? Okay, yes, I can see it in full.
And do you recognize this?
If you could have your co-counsel keep scrolling.
Objection, Your Honor. Lack of foundation.
Response?
Your Honor, I do believe I laid enough foundation as I asked about if there was any communications regarding the downfalls or that study, and this is that communication, and I am now trying to admit it into evidence.
I appreciate that argument. I think that the authenticity of this exhibit has been stipulated, but I would like to have the witness testify as to exactly what this is, which I think you were in the process of doing before you move admission. So just please be mindful to move admission before we publish this to the jury.
Yes, Your Honor.
So the objection is sustained, but with permission to conduct further foundation.
Now, Ms. Durst, what does this seem to be?
This Is the email that I received from my then manager, Jerry Langley, announcing the study which Lush would be conducting, looking for those carcinogenic qualities to humans in Jerufo samples at Lush.
And does it seem to be a work-related email or a personal email?
It absolutely is a work-related and professional email. Jerry Langley at the time was my manager, and so it absolutely was strictly professional.
Does it seem to be a clear and accurate copy?
Could you have your co-counsel scroll down just one more time so I can make sure? Yes, it absolutely does.
Your Honor, I now move to admit what has been previously marked as Exhibit 4 into evidence.
Defense counsel, any remaining objection?
Yes, Your Honor, this email is hearsay.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Please.
Your Honor, under Rule 801, subsection D, subsection 2, subsection D, this is opposing party because it was made by an employee of Lush, and I have laid the proper foundation for that.
All right. The objection's overruled. This exhibit is admitted.
Now, if I could have my co-counsel just scroll down just a little bit to the second paragraph, could you read out aloud the first sentence of that paragraph, please?
Sure. It states, following our lab's June Drufo study, concerns have arisen regarding generalized findings of potential carcinogenic qualities identified in samples produced during a period early in the year.
What does this sentence mean to you, misters?
This is, we've a little bit discussed previously, is Jerry and upper management at Lush announcing that they had recognized some concerns in our past Drufo samples. And so we were going to reinitiate a study looking for carcinogenic qualities within Drufo. And so this is essentially just the announcement of that.
Now, if I could have my co-counsel scroll up to the top of the email. Under the to category of the email, do you happen to see any of your superiors in that portion?
I do, yes. I was a pretty low-level employee during my entire time at Lush. And so I see a lot of my managers or people who worked as supervisors, such as Alex Monroe. But most notably, I noticed Blake Doncourt, who was and still is the CEO of Lush Fertilizer.
Now, my co-counsel can stop screen sharing. Now, moving back to the product Drufo, was there anything that Lush could have done to get rid of the possible carcinogens in Drufo?
There was, yes. There's a process that I actually learned about during my time at Lush, and that was the process of baking the chemical bonding agent.
Did this process ever happen?
Not at Lush, no.
Now, moving on a little bit to your relationship with Blake Doncourt. Do you know Blake Doncourt?
Not as much as I used to. So I would say for a solid period in my life, sure I did, but not now.
What was your relationship with them?
For the earlier part of my life, it was a pretty strong relationship. I grew up best friends with Blake Doncourt's son, Charlie. And so I got to know Blake as the parent of my best friend. I would say they almost became like a mentor to me. But as soon as I started working at Lush, and I spent some time there, that relationship quickly deteriorated and it just isn't the same anymore.
Now, moving to your time at Lush, did you ever come into any conflicts while you were at Lush?
I did, yes.
Objection, Your Honor, this is a leading question.
I'll allow the question to have the background of the information. I mean, she might have come into conflicts. She might not have come into conflicts. And so the question doesn't necessarily suggest one answer over the other. Your point is taken, but the objection is overruled for the sake of background information.
Now, did you need me to re-ask my question, Ms. Durst?
Yeah, just so I can make sure to answer it exactly.
Did you ever come into any conflicts while you were at Lush?
I did, yes. I had lots of concerns about the potentially carcinogenic qualities in Drufo. And I just didn't feel like my coworkers and management at Lush held my concerns or those concerns in the same way that I did. And so that caused a lot of conflicts between my coworkers and I, just because we clearly didn't see eye to eye on customer safety and the lack of safety in Drufo.
Did you ever bring any of these conflicts to your superiors or supervisors?
I did, yes. And I specifically brought them to Blake, given our history. I attempted to talk to Blake about the concerns that I was having, not only with my coworkers, but around Rufo and its potentially carcinogenic qualities. But Blake essentially told me just to handle my own issues.
Now, did these conflicts ever become resolved?
No, as a matter of fact, they just got worse as my time went on at Lush. I began to get really negative performance reviews, and it was clear that my coworkers were looking down on me because of the concerns I held around Rufo. And so it just got worse and worse until I eventually felt like the work environment became so hostile that I became motivated to leave in 2005 and then did take action in leaving in 2006.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions at this time.
Is it Ms. Entner? Do you have cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you. Ms. Durst, I want to start with your relationship with the Don Courts. You were close with the Don Courts, correct?
I wouldn't say I am anymore, but as
You
I've
were.
discussed, oh yes,
Sorry. I said you were close.
yeah, for that earlier period of my life, yeah, I would say.
And Ms. Doncourt pulled strings so that you could work at Lush Fertilizer, correct?
Given that I'm not Miss Doncourt, I'm not sure on that one.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Ms. Durst. Well, it says in sorry, I got confused. You say in your witness statement that he pulled strings for you.
I don't believe that I do. I have no recollection of writing that exactly verbatim. And so that's not true. That's not something I would say today.
Okay. But they did pull strings for you because you did not have a job lined up, correct?
Again, Miss Entner, I'm not Blake Doncourt, and so I can't give you a conclusive answer there. I'm not exactly sure.
Okay. Do you recall giving a statement before this trial?
I do, absolutely. I believe you're referencing my affidavit in this case.
Yes, and you made that statement when you were under oath and you swore to tell the truth, correct?
I did, absolutely, just as I've done today.
Your Honor, can the witness please be permitted to look at a copy of her own witness statement? Thank you. Ms. Doncourt, can you please reference page 17, lines 20 through 22?
Forgive me,
Yes.
counsel, do you mean Ms. Durst?
Oh, sorry, yes.
Sorry.
Ms. Durst.
Could you repeat that line number for me, please?
Yes, 20 through 22.
Okay.
Starting with he was sure that Blake could pull some strings for me. Like, positions like that are hard for new graduates without experience, so I could not pass up an opportunity like that. You did indeed say that Mr. Doncourt pulled strings for you, correct, Ms. Durst?
That is not correct. In this line, I was referencing Charlie, my longtime best friend, and I'm just saying that he stated that he was sure that Blake could pull some strings for me, but I mean, this is just Charlie speculating on Blake's speculation, I guess you could say. Oh, Miss Entner, I believe
Counsel,
I can't hear
your
you.
audio's off.
I'm sorry, yes, thank you.
Okay.
We'll move on. You did not graduate top of your class, correct?
I didn't know.
When you were hired at Lush, it was your first job in fertilizer, correct?
It was, yes. It wasn't even a job, you could really say. It was an internship. And so, yeah, it was my first internship of the sort. But like we've discussed, I was a new grad. I mean, that's how it goes for most.
And when you were officially hired at Lush Fertilizer, Ms. Durst, you started to research Drufo, correct?
I did. Yes, it wasn't right off the bat, but it was pretty soon in my employment. As I've discussed with Ms. Chamberlain, I was at Lush Fertilizer during the time that they were working on the research and development of Drufo. So yeah, I absolutely, I was tasked with a research assignment regarding it, sure.
And a yes or no answer will do for this question. You were not there at the creation, you were not working at Lush during the creation of Drufo, correct?
I was not. If I remember correctly, that was in 2001. And I mean, I was a sophomore in college at the time. So absolutely, I wasn't there.
And you said that you started to suspect foul play within Lush regarding Drufo when you were assigned to research it, correct? A yes or no answer will do.
Well, it's really not as simple as a yes or no. It wasn't right off the bat. I didn't suspect right away. But as soon as I started doing some research, sure.
But you made no attempt to contact any authorities, healthcare, or government officials.
As I've said, I was an intern. It was my job to report to my superiors, not to government. And so, no, I did not contact any government.
I'm sorry, let me make this clear. This was during your job at Lush Fertilizer and not during your internship.
Oh, sure. I must have just gotten the timeline confused. I was a pretty low level employee. And so if anyone was going to report to the government, it wouldn't have been me.
Shortly after you suspected Drufo, you were put on a performance improvement plan, correct?
I was, yes, as I've discussed with Ms. Chamberlain, as soon as I started raising a lot of my concerns around Drufo, my coworkers really looked down on me. And so I think this was their way of just trying to regulate me.
And you had a conversation with Mr. Doncourt about this, correct?
I did, yes, as I've discussed with Ms. Chamberlain previously.
And after the conversation, you described yourself as confused and betrayed by someone you were extremely close with. A yes or no answer will do.
I believe that is how I described it in my affidavit, yes.
And right after the conversation, you immediately just started to look for another job, correct?
I did. As I've discussed with Ms. Chamberlain, it really felt like Lush was a hostile work environment. And I mean, especially as a woman in a predominantly male field, I really felt like I needed to be a place where—
I'm sorry, Ms. Durst, that was not the question that I asked. I just asked if you started to look for another job.
I did. And the description I was giving you was exactly why. I just felt like it was too hostile to stay.
Okay. And you chose to take a job at Lush's biggest competitor, Tara's Greenery, correct?
One of Lush's biggest competitors at the time, yeah.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions at this time.
Ms. Chamberlain, do you have any redirect based on cross?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right.
And just to make sure timekeepers are ready.
Can the timekeepers just indicate in the chat whether they are? Okay, great. I got a yes.
Am I good to begin, Your Honor?
Yes, please do.
Now, Ms. Durst, could you tell me a little bit more about that research assignment that you talked about a little bit on cross?
Yeah, absolutely. What exactly would you like me to discuss with it? It was a pretty long period of time.
Just expand on what you were trying to say during cross a little bit more. It seemed like you were being backed into a corner a little bit.
Oh, sure. And let me know if this isn't exactly what you were looking for, but during the research assignment, I came across, of course, that England study that we discussed. And because it said that Drufo was potentially carcinogenic, I really started to become really aware of some of the downfalls of Drufo. And so that's when some of my speculation around Drufo and its potential carcinogenic qualities occurred, and that's why I was concerned about Drufo and Lush's lack of prioritization of customer safety.
Now, moving on a little bit to your leaving Lush, could you expand a little more why you chose to go to Tara's Greenery?
Absolutely, yeah. As I was attempting to explain earlier, Lush just became a really incredibly hostile work environment. I was new on the job, and so it was really hard to, as a low-level employee, not feel heard, as I would have liked to move through the company. And so I started looking for employment at Tara's after I felt like Blake had betrayed my trust, and Tara's was hiring jobs that I had relevant experience for. And so I thought that it would be the next right move for me.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Any recross based on that redirect?
Not at this time, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. In the court, we'll excuse the witness with our thanks, but reminding you that if you are recalled, you still will remain under oath. And let's take a moment to change the names on the cameras. And when counsel is ready, please advise.
Apologies, Your Honor. Plaintiff is having a few technical difficulties. Will you just give us one moment?
Of course.
Apologies, Your Honor. Plaintiff is ready to proceed.
No apology necessary, but thanks for letting me know. Defense counsel?
We are ready. Thank you, Your Honor.
All right. Plaintiff may proceed when you're ready.
Ready. Your Honor, plaintiff calls Dakota Weirs to the stand.
All right. Ms. Weirs, just please recall that you're under oath and you can proceed.
Ready. Ms. Weirs, will you please state your name and spell your last for the record?
My first is Dakota and my last is Weirs.
Okay. And Ms. Weirs, we've heard a lot about this case today. Can you tell me more about yourself?
Yeah, my name is Dakota. I'm 20 years old. I play the piano and I have non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
And why are we here?
We are here today because I am suing Lush Fertilizer for causing my non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
And let's talk a little bit more about your life beforehand. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, before my diagnosis, I was extremely active in my school community, in my outside of school community. I had hobbies, I had a job, future.
And let's talk more about that job. Where were you working?
I worked at Haven Landscaping.
And what was it like working there?
It was pretty easy. Other than a couple of heavy lifting, it wasn't that hard and quite enjoyable as well.
And what kind of things did you do while working there?
I got hired too young to be able to work with the big machinery, so I mainly worked with spreading fertilizer and grass seed.
Alrighty. And what were some of the products that you used?
I don't know all of them by heart, but I do know for a fact that we used Lush Fertilizer.
And is this where you came in contact with Drufo?
It is.
And I understand that you have a twin. Did they work with you?
No, my twin Skylar is allergic to grass. So I always had the adventure, nature-seeking gene in mine.
Yeah. And how long have you been working at Haven Landscaping?
I started working when I was 14, so I'd say 4-ish years, maybe a little more, maybe a little less.
And why were you working there for so long?
I worked at Haven Landscaping mostly to be able to pay for my college.
And where were you planning on going to college?
Initially, I hadn't had a plan, but I ended up becoming so lucky that I got a full ride scholarship to Juilliard, one of the most prestigious musical schools in the United States.
Juilliard is really impressive. Were you excited to go to Juilliard?
It was my dream since I was a child. I love Juilliard, and only the best musicians go. So I always wanted to go.
And what were you going to Juilliard for?
It would be for my piano skills.
And do you still play the piano today?
Unfortunately, I cannot play the piano anymore due to my cancer and the effects it has on me.
And what are some of the effects of your cancer?
I get fatigue quite easily. Oftentimes it's difficult for me to breathe. I bruise easily, especially when I sit down for long periods of time, and many more.
Does that mean you're still able to go to school?
No, I did have to turn down the scholarship because I'm no longer able to play piano.
So what are your plans for the future then?
I don't have any plans for my future. I have no cure for my cancer, and I don't know what's going to happen to me.
Thank you, Ms. Weirs. Your Honor, no further questions.
I note that we're out of time, but of course, cross-examination is permitted.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Dakota Weirs. Let's begin by discussing your enjoyment of playing the piano. You play the piano, correct?
That's correct. I'm known for playing piano.
And you received a scholarship from Juilliard, correct?
Yes, a full ride one.
And though you did not take the scholarship, it still stands for 2 years, correct?
That is correct, but I no longer am able to play the piano, so there's no point of me taking that scholarship as it was for the piano.
However, your doctor has hope you will recover before then, correct?
That is correct, but
Objection, Your Honor.
What's the objection? What's the basis?
This is privileged information between communications from patient to physician. This is prohibited in court.
Counsel, any response?
Objection exception pursuant to Rule 803. This describes past or present symptoms or sensations.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Yes, briefly.
There are no exceptions to this rule. This is prohibited completely from testimony between physician and patient. Due to HIPAA regulations, this witness may not talk about discussions between them and their doctor.
So because the plaintiff has placed her medical condition at issue in this case, and these are discussions between herself and her physician regarding that specific medical condition, I'm going to allow the question, but I am going to instruct all counsel, witnesses, and members of the jury that this information is to be kept confidential and not disclosed outside of this courtroom. That is an order of the court that can be punishable that will be punished in transgression by a finding of contempt. You may continue your cross-examination. And the objection is overruled.
Thank you, Your Honor. Now let's discuss your landscaping career. You have experience in landscaping for many years, correct?
I'd say, yeah.
And you stated that you love the outdoors and feeling the wind hitting your face, correct?
It's one of the best feelings. It gives me joy in life. So yes.
So you would not wear protective face coverings while landscaping, correct?
I didn't really see a reason to wear protective anything, as there was no true warning of what could happen to me if I didn't.
And your boss instructed you to wear a face covering, correct?
I do believe he had, but again, I had seen no reason to, as well as no one else had.
But you were also supposed to wear long sleeves, pants, and gloves when working with the fertilizer, correct?
Correct.
No one at Haven's Landscaping enforced this either, correct?
That is also correct.
And you were told to wear protective clothing because of the chemicals in the fertilizer, correct?
That is right.
And you use several other fertilizers and lawn chemicals, correct?
Yeah, you can't really use just one, so yes.
So these other chemicals and fertilizers could potentially be harmful, correct?
I believe so.
Thank you. You state that your boss recovered Exhibit 1 as a label during your time of use, correct?
That is correct.
Please refer to Exhibit 1. And if we could please screen share on behalf of my co-counsel.
Please do.
Can we pause time, please, while we have a technical issue, Your Honor?
Yes, please pause the time.
Thank you.
And while time is paused, I did want to make sure that the time was paused for plaintiff during the technical issue. If the timekeeper could just confirm that that's correct, I want to make sure that we're doing that equally for both sides.
That's correct.
Thank you. All right, so when the exhibit is shared on the screen, that's when time will resume.
Thank you, Your Honor.
You're welcome.
Okay. Are you familiar with this label?
Yes, I am.
What is this?
The label is from Lush Fertilizer.
And does this exhibit fairly and accurately depict the label that you saw?
Would you be able to zoom in on the main label? I can't quite see it. Thank you. Yes, this is accurate.
Your Honor, the defense moves to admit Exhibit 1 as evidence.
Objection, Your Honor. This label is hearsay and cumulative. The jury already has a copy of this label and is able to understand the contents within it, along with hearsay, as this is being brought in for the truth of the matter asserted.
So how does the jury already have a copy of this, counsel?
The jury has been provided as part of the pretrial rulings a copy of all exhibits. I believe this is in rules of competition.
Right.
They've been able to see this label and understand the contents of it.
Okay, but has it been moved for admission prior to now?
No, Your Honor.
All right. And the other objection was hearsay, is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. So I'm going to overrule the objection based on the jury already having it because it hasn't been moved for admission yet. But if defense counsel could please respond to the hearsay objection.
Yes, Your Honor. Pursuant to Rule 803, this is a business record as it is held in the regular course of business.
I know that authenticity is stipulated, but I don't know that business record is stipulated. So is this witness able to establish that this is actually a business record? And of whom is it a business record? Of Lush or of the landscaping company?
Of Lush, Your Honor.
All right. I don't think this witness has the capacity to establish that this is a business record of Lush. Do you have another response to the hearsay objection? All right. In the interest of time, I'm going to provisionally admit this, but if at some point in time we discover that this is actually not a true and accurate copy, or that the contents are being asserted for some truth beyond what just the label says on its face, then I'll instruct the jury not to respond to it, but you can proceed with your questioning.
Thank you, Your Honor. This label directly reads hazards as well as caution in all capital letters, correct?
Yes, I do see that.
This label also clearly states user safety recommendations, correct?
Recommendations, yes.
And this label directly states to use protective clothing with exposed skin, a face mask, to wash your hands before and after use, correct?
It does recommend it, yes.
And no one at Haven showed you this label, correct?
The labels were on the packaging. So I don't believe anyone showed it to me.
Okay. You suspect that you received non-Hodgkin lymphoma because you and your sister Skylar experienced similar things except for the landscaping job, correct?
My twin, yes.
Counsel, are you done with this exhibit? I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
All right, if we could have it taken off the screen. Thank you. Go ahead.
You say Skylar has done extensive research on Drufo, correct?
I believe so. I don't quite know everything that they do at their work.
And yes or no will suffice on this as last question. Your sister Skylar is testifying against you today, correct?
That is correct.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
To revisit the objection, I am going to allow that to be admitted because the nature of the questions didn't. The objection was that it goes to the truth of the matter asserted, and the nature of the questions was such that it didn't ask the witness or the exhibit to testify as to whether or not it was a true statement of what, for example, was inside the bag, but rather the effect it had on the witness. But otherwise, your objection is well taken, so thank you. Let's see. Do we have time for redirect?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you for reminding me. I appreciate that. So I believe this witness may now be excused. And I would just remind the witnesses I have with every other witness that if you are recalled, you will still be under oath. Does plaintiff's counsel have any further witnesses?
No, Your Honor. Plaintiff does not have any further witnesses. The plaintiff rests.
All right, thank you. Does the defense intend to call any witnesses?
Yes, Your Honor. The defense would like to call Skylar Weirs to the stand.
All right. Ms. Weir, thank you. Is plaintiff's counsel ready? Do you need to make an adjustment as far as any technological issues or change of counsel?
We should be all right, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right. If defense counsel is ready, and see there, I've mixed up words and names as well, so that's not just you. You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Weirs, can you please state and spell your last name for the court?
My name is Skylar Weirs, W-E-I-R-S.
Ms. Weirs, what is your job?
I'm an investigative journalist for The Rationalist magazine. I also am a waitress just to make extra cash, but journalism is my true passion.
And what type of magazine is The Rationalist?
So The Rationalist is a science education and advocacy magazine, which basically means that we encourage readers to know all of the scientific details behind highly politicized scientific topics before they come to conclusions. For example, when I wrote my article about Drufo, I was able to learn everything there possibly was to know about Drufo before coming to a decision on whether or not I found it was safe.
And what main types of articles do you write for The Rationalist?
Mainly individual health and corporate policy, and several of these were published in high-regarded scientific magazines.
And how is the background in research in individual health and corporate policy even relevant to this case?
I actually spent an entire year doing research on modern agritech, which included Drufo. My research included reading publications by agritech companies. I reviewed reference studies in those publications, and I tracked down information done by the United States Department of Agriculture and the National Association of State Departments of Agriculture. And this led me to write an article that questioned the link between Drufo and cancer.
And when did you write this article about Drufo?
I wrote this article before Dakota was even diagnosed with cancer, so none of my beliefs about Drufo and none of my beliefs about my sister have anything to do with each other.
And where did you get your education from, Ms. Weirs?
I don't actually have a college degree.
What are your qualifications then?
My knowledge includes general and historical and statistical information. I have an overall perspective on agritech that a college classroom just simply couldn't have given me.
And what was your role in this case?
I was retained by the defense to share my research on commercial agriculture and GMOs.
What exactly is modern agritech?
This is the use of technology and technological innovation to improve the efficiency of agricultural products.
Your Honor, the defense offers Skylar Weirs as an expert witness regarding modern agri-tech and the effect of pesticides pursuant to Rule 702 to share her opinion on the safety of pesticides, herbicides, and other agri-tech products.
The objection or voir dire?
Yes. Yes, Your Honor. May we do a voir dire?
Yes.
Ready? Is my timekeeper ready? Alrighty, Ms. Weirs, let's talk more about your education. As you earlier stated, you never went to college.
That's correct, but I've done extensive research on this topic.
Alrighty, so you don't have a bachelor's degree,
No,
or even an associate's degree.
I don't, but I've done extensive research on the topic that's being discussed here today.
Are you any type of scientist?
No, but I've read scientific articles and done, again, extensive research on all of this.
Okay, but you're not a scientist.
That's correct.
Alrighty, and you don't work in a laboratory either.
No,
And you're not a doctor.
no,
And you don't have any medical training.
that's correct.
Alrighty, and you don't have any formal education on writing either, correct?
Correct.
But you are a journalist, right?
I am.
And you write a lot of articles for The Rationalist.
I do.
And your editor asked you to write a series about agritech, correct?
That's correct.
And that series took you just under a year?
Mhm.
Objection, Your Honor. These are questions that should be asked on cross and not as part of a voir dire.
I'll allow some latitude, but I would ask plaintiff's counsel to keep voir dire relatively brief. And then if Ms. Weirs is admitted as an expert, you can return on cross to additional qualification questions.
Thank you, Your Honor. Alrighty, Ms. Weirs, that series took you just under a year, correct?
That's correct.
And you're 20 years old, right?
Yes, I am.
And you graduated high school at 18?
Yes.
So you've only been professionally writing for 2 years, correct?
Correct, but I've been doing research well beyond these 2 years.
You started your research before you were 18?
I started my research. I've been researching this for years. I've just now decided to write an article about it.
Just to confirm, Ms. Weirs, this article took you a year to write?
That's correct.
Alrighty. And you found your own research for these articles, correct?
I did.
And you're aware that companies can have bias.
Yes.
And you included research in your article that was publications from companies, correct?
Objection, Your Honor. I'm sorry. I just don't see what this has to do with Ms. Weirs being admitted as an expert.
I'll sustain the objection at this time. I think that these are cross-examination questions to the weight of her opinions that she hasn't offered yet. So counsel, save those questions, but confine your voir dire to her qualifications, please.
Alrighty. Your Honor, I object to this witness being an expert because they lack training, education. Rule 702 does not require that they have a formal education, but they do not have adequate knowledge to be able to testify under the grounds of being an expert in agritech today.
Okay. I appreciate the objection. However, the court's already ruled that based upon the qualifications that were presented in the witness statement, she would be admitted as an expert, and the court is not now going to change that opinion. However, we do note that the weight of this witness's testimony may be challenged by cross-examination, which you're welcome to revisit those same questions once she's admitted. So the objection is overruled, and this witness is admitted for the topics proposed by defense counsel.
Ms. Weirs, you say you came to your expert conclusion through your research with the Rationalist. Tell us more about this.
So recently, Lush Fertilizer has been the target of many conspiracy theories. And since Rationalist is a science education advocacy magazine, I decided to do some more research.
How so?
Well, people that are hesitant to accept change have been spending millions of dollars to destroy Lush's reputation simply because they know that Drufo can overpower their businesses.
What do you mean when you say Drufo could overpower their businesses?
Well, we know that Drufo is a bonding agent, which means that less fertilizer needs to be applied to reach the desired effect.
And how does this work?
Drufo bonds the top grass to the active ingredients in Lush's fertilizer, which is nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And this prevents the ingredients from washing away quickly, so Drufo needs to be applied much less.
And what are the benefits to the fertilizer not being needed to be applied as often?
Then the chemicals that I said before don't need to be applied nearly as often to reach the optimum yield. Lush ultimately minimizes nitrogen penetration.
And why is minimizing nitrogen penetration so important?
Because this means that the nitrogen is much less likely to contaminate groundwater and waterways. Synthetic nitrogen can contribute to things like cancer and adverse reproductive outcomes. So if you can minimize this, it's much better for everybody.
Okay, so Drufo minimizes nitrogen penetration. What about pesticides and fertilizer though?
Lush actually has much fewer pesticides than the average grass seed product. Things like glyphosate and arsenic isn't in Lush.
And why is less glyphosate and arsenic important?
Because there's a much clear link between these two pesticides and cancer.
Ms. Weirs, in your expert opinion, did you reach any conclusions about this case?
In my expert opinion, Lush is just as safe, if not even more safe than the average grass seed product. Dakota is really blaming the only thing that was designed to keep her as safe as possible. And I don't think it didn't elevate her risk of developing cancer.
You have chosen to take a side against your sister. Why?
I'm not here to take a side against my sister. I'm simply here to stand by my research. I know what I'm doing is right, and this is the part that I really believe in.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions at this time.
Counsel for the plaintiff, any cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. May I have is the court ready for me to proceed?
Court is if the technology is and the timekeeper.
Yeah, the timekeeper is ready. All right, perfect. Alrighty, Ms. Weirs, Drufo has multiple carcinogenic properties in it, correct?
Correct, but it's much safer than the average fertilizer.
Okay, but it does contain nitrogen, right?
Correct.
And that is known to be carcinogenic?
Yes, but the amount that it has is much less than the average product.
All right, but that was a yes, it does contain nitrogen, which is carcinogenic.
Yes.
Alrighty, so aside from nitrogen, it also doubles as a pesticide.
Correct.
Alrighty, and pesticides contain many carcinogenic properties also, correct?
They do, but Drufo is a much safer pesticide.
But they do contain those carcinogenic properties.
Yes.
Alrighty, and also pesticides are by definition a poison, right?
Correct.
Okay, so all fertilizers, including Lush products, are unsafe, right?
Lush products are much safer than all other fertilizers.
But they do have a level of risk.
Yes, a small level.
Yeah, okay. So Drufo is a safe product, right?
It's much safer, yes.
With it containing those two carcinogenic elements?
Yes.
All right, so let's talk a little bit more about the articles. You get paid to write articles, right?
I do.
And the rationalist is paying you?
Yes.
So if you didn't write an article, you wouldn't get paid.
That's correct.
All right, so the rationalist is a quarterly magazine,
Mm-hmm.
and which means you guaranteed 4 paychecks every year, right?
Yes.
Okay, so your article, sorry, excuse me. If you don't write an article, you wouldn't make enough to pay bills, correct?
That's correct. But as I said before, I'm also a waitress, which helps me get additional income.
And that additional income could be inconsistent, correct?
Yes.
So not everybody likes your writing, right?
That's correct. But that's the same thing for every journalist. Not everyone has to like what I write.
Yeah, and that people don't like your articles because you kind of challenged the agri-tech community.
That's
Objection, Your Honor. This is speculation. The opposing counsel is calling for Ms. Weirs to speculate on why people don't like her writing.
So if Ms. Weirs knows for whatever reason and has personal knowledge of why people don't like her writing, then she can answer the question. But otherwise, I do sustain the objection and would just caution Ms. Weirs not to speculate. But the objection's overruled.
Alrighty, I'll just ask that again, Ms. Weirs. So not everyone likes your writing, right?
That's correct, but not everyone has to like my writing. I don't write my articles to please everybody.
Yeah, and that's because you challenge the agri-tech community.
Sure.
And because of that, you've lost job opportunities.
Yes.
And that's become difficult for your articles to become popular, right?
Yes, but again, my income doesn't just come from my articles. I'm a journalist because that's my passion and I have additional income.
Okay, and because of this case, your articles are becoming more popular, yes?
Sure.
So that means you'll get more writing opportunities at The Rationalist, correct?
Potentially.
And The Rationalist is the company that is giving you a paycheck, correct?
Yes, that's who I work for.
And as you've stated, you get paid through these articles. So more readers, more articles, more money for you, right?
Sure, but I'm not in it for the money. If I were in it for the money, then I would be doing more.
Yeah, but that'd definitely be nice, correct?
It would be nice.
Yeah, okay. So that extra paycheck will kind of help cover some of the debt you've accumulated, right?
Sure.
And that debt comes from gambling.
Yes.
And these new readers would really help you get out of that debt.
Objection, Your Honor. Relevance, I don't see how Ms. Weir's gambling debts are relevant to this case.
Response?
Your Honor, I've established that this article has been becoming more popular with this case. This establishes the financial bias that Ms. Weirs may have in this case, and that will reflect in her testimony today.
I think Ms. Weirs testified that she would make more money with more readers and that she has debt and that the debt comes from gambling. And so I'll allow the questioning, but would advise the jury not to take the gambling nature of the debt into effect in their considerations of Ms. Weir's credibility. So the objection is overruled with that caveat to the jury. You may proceed.
Alrighty. Ms. Weir, so let's talk a little bit now about your relationship with Dakota. She's your twin, correct?
Mm-hmm. She is.
And she's suing Lush Fertilizer
Yes, she is.
because she believes they gave her non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
Yes, that is why she's suing.
And you're kind of testifying against your sibling today, right?
I am, but not in any hard feelings towards Dakota. I'm simply stating what I feel is right.
Of course. And you grew up with Dakota.
I did.
And you know that she's a talented piano player.
Yes.
And she was going to Juilliard.
Mm-hmm. She was.
And you're stuck at a part-time job?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And you were bitter about that. She's off to college. You're stuck here, part-time server, right?
That's true. But like I said, journalism is my passion. My passion wasn't piano playing. That was hers.
Yeah, but your father cut you off financially after all of that gambling that you've accumulated, right?
Yes.
And Dakota was off full ride to college.
That's correct. Because she earned her full ride.
Yeah, but that made you angry because your father is not helping you in any way, right?
Yes.
And now you're testifying here today, right?
Yes, but I'm testifying because I am on the side that I believe is right.
The side that is giving Miss Weir's cancer, correct?
Correct.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Briefly.
Yeah.
Ms. Weirs, why did you decide to take a position against your sister?
I'm not taking it against my sister. I'm standing by my research and I'm on the side that I believe is the right decision.
And in your expert opinion, is Drufo safe?
Yes.
No further questions, Your Honor.
I'll allow a recross based on those two questions if you have one.
Yes, Your Honor. I'll keep it brief. Ms. Weirs, you stated that Drufo is a safe product, correct?
Yes.
And that safe product contains 2 carcinogenic elements?
Yes, but as I said before.
Thank you, Ms. Weirs. No further questions, Your Honor.
All right. May this witness be excused? I'll just answer that since everyone's gone on mute. The witness is excused, but with the same admonition, that she remains under oath in the event she is recalled. Does the defense have a second witness? And yes, we will give you time to adjust your microphones, etc.
The defense calls Blake Doncourt to the stand.
All right. And just a reminder to the timekeeper while we're switching, please keep the time paused.
Please state and spell your last name for the court.
I'm sorry, hold on one second, counsel. Let me make sure that counsel for plaintiff is ready.
My apologies, yeah.
That's all right. Counsel for the plaintiff could just let us know, because they're switching computers and switching names.
All right, I'm ready, Your Honor.
All right. Go ahead and begin and start the clock, please.
Please state and spell your last name for the court.
My name is Blake Doncourt, Doncourt.
And what's your profession and involvement in Lush?
I am the CEO of Lush Fertilizer.
How does Lush manage its profits?
Lush is a successful company, and I'm happy to say we're able to share some of that success. We donate 10% of our annual income to charities that decrease the nitrogen footprint.
And have you or Lush ever been recognized for your contributions to the environment?
Yes, both I and Lush have been recognized. I was nominated for the Champions of the Earth Award in
Objection, Your
2020.
Honor. Character evidence?
Response?
This does not go to character evidence, Your Honor.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Yes.
Your Honor, opposing counsel is bolstering their witness, which does extremely go to character evidence.
Your Honor, brief response.
Brief.
I'm laying foundation for the credibility of the company.
So your objection is noted. I'm going to allow the line of questioning, but ask that it be limited, only because I think that this witness is, as the CEO of the company, his credibility has been impugned, or at least I'm sure that it will be on cross-examination. And so rather than revisit it on redirect, for the sake of efficiency, let's address it now. So the objection's overruled. Carry on.
Have you or Lush ever been recognized for your contributions to the environment?
Yes, both I and Lush. Lush was nominated for the SEAL Award, which is a business sustainability award, and I was nominated for the Champions of the Earth Award in 2020.
And as a company and CEO, what are your values?
At Lush, we consider ourselves great stewards of environmental and safety practices, and our contributions to the environment speak for themselves.
What are your qualifications for your knowledge of your product?
Well, I am the CEO of the company, so I oversee all research and development. I know what's going on.
And how long have you had this company?
I've had this company since the year 2000.
And what about Lush makes it different from other fertilizers?
Lush uses a revolutionary product, Drufo. It's a bonding agent.
And based on your knowledge, do you think Drufo is harmful?
No, not at all. According to our in-house research, there's no reason to believe that it would be.
So why isn't there a warning label on your product?
There's no warning label on our product because there's no reason for us to believe that Drufo is harmful.
And if there was proper science and research to support a possible danger in your product, what would you have done differently?
Oh, without a doubt, we would have definitely put a warning label on our products.
Dakota Weirs claims you do not bake your fertilizer in order to save money for your ex-Morgan. What do you think about this?
That's completely false. I make more than enough money to pay a large chunk to my ex, support me and my new partner, support Lush, and I also make enough money to donate 10% of our annual income to charity.
So why didn't you bake your products?
There was no reason for us to bake our products. That's like riding a bike with training wheels, even if you know how to ride a bike.
Was Lush ever advised of possible risks?
No, not to my knowledge.
Explain your connection with Carson Durst.
Yes. Mrs. Durst, she was a family friend who I mistakenly pulled strings to hire.
And ever since Carson Durst left Lush, what is the new occupation?
She now works for Terra's Greenery, where she's being paid more than we could ever afford to pay her at Lush. And Tara's Greeny has also developed a new product that is very similar to Drufo, which I find very odd.
Please shift your attention to Exhibit 5. And may my counsel please screen share this exhibit as well.
Yes.
Please describe what is Exhibit 5.
Exhibit 5 is a non-compete agreement between Ms. Durst and I.
And does this agreement fairly and accurately depict the agreement between Lush and Carson Durst?
Yes, it does.
Your Honor, the defense moves to admit Exhibit 5 as evidence.
Response?
I object on the grounds of hearsay.
Counsel?
Pursuant to Rule 803, that this is a business record.
I don't think you have a foundation as to whether it is a record that's kept in the ordinary course of business. I think Mr. Doncourt said that it was between himself and Carson Durst. So the objection is sustained, but you're welcome to lay a further foundation.
Further foundation will be laid, Your Honor. Is this a standard for Lush employees?
Yes, it is. I have all my employees sign this non-compete agreement.
The defense offers to move Exhibit 5 as evidence, Your Honor.
All right. I'm going to admit it at this time. The testimony now is that it was signed by employees, and that does qualify it as a business record. So I'll go ahead and admit it. But your objection earlier was noted. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor. And just for clarification, who signed this?
Mrs. Durst and I signed it.
What would happen if Carson Durst disclosed any information to Tara's Greenery?
That would be a direct violation to this non-compete agreement, and we'd have the right to take legal action against Ms. Durst.
Do you sympathize with Dakota Weirs?
Yes, of course I do. Non-Hodgkin lymphoma is a terrible disease. I truly, truly hope she recovers as fast as possible. However, I disagree with the claim she has against my product.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Ms. Chamberlain, for the plaintiff, any cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. And just to make sure timekeepers are ready. May I begin, Your Honor?
Please.
Now, Mr. Doncourt, you built Lush from the ground up.
Correct.
You spent day and night to get the company to where it is today.
Yes.
But you couldn't have done this all alone.
No.
You had to have a little bit of financial help from investors.
Correct.
Now, we're going to come back to those investors in a little bit. You would consider yourself, as well as your company, environmentalists?
Yes.
You even donate to charities?
Correct.
Now, we're going to move on a little bit to your relationship with Carson Durst. Carson Durst was almost like a second kid to you.
Yes, was.
They spent a lot of time at your house.
Yep.
Went to soccer with your kid.
Correct.
And after college, you gave them a job at Lush.
Yes, I pulled strings to hire them.
But they seemed ungrateful for the many opportunities you had given them.
Yes, they were ungrateful.
Now, moving on a little bit to your product, Drufo. You made the choice to not bake Drufo.
Correct.
But baking Drufo would have gotten rid of any risk.
Correct, but there was no risk to begin with.
You needed this money for other reasons, such as the financial investors that I mentioned.
if I needed financial investment, excuse me, no, that's not true.
You didn't need this money to pay back the financial investors in your company?
No,
Now, you wrote an affidavit in this case, correct?
correct.
You know, at any point you could have changed this?
Yes,
Now, if I could have my co-counsel screen share your affidavit, please. Now, are you able to see this, Mr. Doncourt?
yes,
And if I could have my co-counsel scroll down to the last page. That is your signature, correct?
correct.
Now, if I could have my co-counsel scroll to line 108, please, and if you could read along silently as I read aloud. Lush needed these earnings to pay the vulture capitalists who provided our company with seed funds. Did I read that correctly, Mr. Doncourt?
Correct.
Thank you. My co-counsel can stop screen sharing now. Now, just to be clear, you needed this money to pay the investors.
Correct.
But baking Drufo would have gotten rid of even the smallest risk.
Yes.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
All right. Counsel for the defense, any redirect based on that cross?
Not at this time, Your Honor.
All right. Then this witness may be excused. Mr. Doncourt, I will just remind you that you remain under oath in the event you're recalled. Does the defense have any further witnesses?
Yes, Your Honor. The defense calls Dr. Devin Williams to the stand.
Okay. Can you just introduce yourself by name? I want to see if that echo is gone before we start the timer.
It has been fixed, Your Honor. I'm sorry.
All right. That's okay. I just want to make sure that we're in good shape there. So is plaintiff's counsel ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. And it looks like the timekeepers are ready. They could just indicate yes. Great. Counsel, proceed.
Doctor, could you please spell or state and spell your last name for the court?
My name is Dr. Devin Williams, Williams.
And Dr. Williams, what is your job?
I'm a research. I lead the development labs at Lush Fertilizer. I'm also the outgoing chair of the company's ethics committee.
And doctor, could you please explain exactly what it is you research as a toxicologist?
I'm a research toxicologist by training and work to understand how biological systems respond to environmental interventions. Now, whether that is alcohol and neurochemical pathways or inorganic compounds and agricultural enhancing organophosphorus products, I see myself as having an inherent responsibility to also consider the why and if beyond immediate proper objectives.
And doctor, would you say that you are experienced in your field of work?
Well, I started my career with Lush over a decade ago, and I've led the toxicology labs for 7 years. So I'd say, yeah, I'm well experienced.
And doctor, what are your qualifications?
My education from undergrad through PhD was completed at Colorado State University in Fort Collins. I also did a specialized post-PhD.
Yes.
I'm objecting on the grounds of rules of competition, rule 5.1.2, as this witness does appear to either be reading or using notes from their affidavit in which they are not allowed to. And even if they are not reading directly from the affidavit, they are directly quoting their previous statement verbatim, which is not allowed.
Okay. So Is the witness, I'll just ask, is the witness reading?
No, Your Honor, I could screen share if you want.
I think if you can, that would answer any questions.
Okay. Oh. Sorry, it won't let me.
Oh, all right.
Your Honor, could we please pause time during this
Yeah,
objection because
do go ahead and pause time.
Sorry, I do not know how to screen share.
All right, one moment.
How do I do that?
Where are you currently, Mr. Hellman? Are you in the same room as everyone or the same building as everyone?
Me?
Yes.
Yes, I am.
All right, do you got to click the screen share button and then choose the screen you want?
Okay.
And then click share at the bottom there.
Okay, it asks allow Zoom to share your screen.
Let's see. Okay, hang on, let me make you a co-host. All right, try it now, Peter.
It says allow Zoom to share your screen.
Okay, can you click OK and will it share it?
Sorry, I'm trying to figure it out right now.
Checkbox. Tell them to quit and Zoom and rejoin.
Sorry, I have to leave the Zoom real quick and rejoin in order to change my settings.
Right. And I just want to be clear, I don't want to impugn anyone's credibility but I do think that sharing the screen will satisfy the objection. And so I think that's probably the simplest and most efficient way to do this. So go ahead and log out and log back in, and that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Your Honor, I'm sorry to bring this back up, but can I confirm that the time has been paused for this?
It should have been paused at the beginning of this. If the timekeepers can confirm.
Okay,
that's correct.
I'm sorry.
It has been paused, Your Honor.
Thank you. Sorry, and I apologize. I know the rules of evidence backwards and forwards, but I'm going to stumble through this a little bit while we just make sure that everyone's where we should be.
And Your Honor, just to clarify, just for the sake of time, even if a screen share isn't necessary, that's okay. I just want to make sure that the witness isn't quoting their affidavit verbatim.
I understand.
I cannot screen share, Your Honor.
All right. I think in the interest of time, let me just admonish the witness not admonish in the pejorative sense. Sorry, that's a legal term. Let me just remind the witness that obviously direct quotations should be avoided. I think I will say that when it comes to describing degrees, programs, there is going to be some overlap between the witness's memory and what's written down. And so far, I haven't seen anything that would indicate that he is reading or intentionally quoting. He may have a great memory. However, I'll keep an eye on it. I do have the witness statement open. And so I'll just try and follow along. But again, Peter, just to address you by your first name, I don't do that to suggest that you're doing anything improper, but rather just to satisfy, in the spirit of competition, your opposing team's question about you're opposing the team's objection. Okay, so that's the only reason I do that. I certainly don't want to make anyone out to be doing anything improper. I haven't reached any such conclusions. So with that said, counsel for plaintiff, does that satisfy your objection?
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you.
You're welcome. And Mr. Hellman, once again, do proceed. And it's the old Russian phrase of trust but verify. So we do trust you, but we're just going to verify as we would anytime. So I will ask counsel, actually, let me just remind everyone where we were. Mr. Dujic had asked him to talk about this witness's credentials and his research and where that's come from and where we were going. I think the witness was talking about his undergraduate and had told us that that was done at Colorado State University at Fort Collins, and that he viewed the area of toxicology as a study of the whole body, including corporeal systems, to use my own paraphrase. And so when Mr. Dujic is ready, please restart your direct examination. And when he restarts his exam, please restart the time. Thank you.
Thank you, and Your Honor, if any new objections come about Dr. Devin Williams' reading of a script, we could simply have him just step far back from his computer if that's necessary.
Thank you.
Thank you. Should I restate that question, Mr. Williams?
The court actually would appreciate if you did.
Okay, thank you. Doctor, what are your qualifications?
My education from undergrad through PhD was completed at Colorado State University. I also did a specialized post-PhD program in pharmacotoxicology at the University of Utah. My work has taken me to various states, but I primarily work in my home state of Colorado now, and I hold various accreditations that are all listed on my CV, including certifications in Colorado, Wyoming, New Mexico, and Utah.
Your Honor, I move to enter Dr. Devin Williams as an expert in the field of toxicology pursuant to Rule 702.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Okay, he's admitted.
Thank you. Doctor, what sort of tests do you perform to ensure the safety of your products?
Due to my training and experience, I'm qualified to conduct tests using biomolecular and biochemical markers that tell me if a substance is going to harm the average person and how to neutralize any harms should they arise.
And doctor, even though you deemed it to be safe, Drufo-based products have been banned in other countries. Why is that?
While the EU and many countries that follow the EU's testings have banned Drufo, it is not because of cancer risks. Under the European Union Nitrate Directive, no new fertilizer formulations may be used that contribute more than incidental nitrate accumulations in lab tests.
And is the amount of nitrates in Lush fertilizer any different than other fertilizers?
No, it is true that if you pour some into a petri dish and add just the right bacteria, you will get just as many nitrates as with other fertilizers. But that's not what happens in nature. So the reality is that the EU bureaucracy chose to prohibit the use of fertilizers that reduce nitrates in nature because they don't do so under unrealistic laboratory conditions.
Objection, Your Honor. I'm re-raising my previous objection under Rules of Competition 5.1.2. As this witness may not be reading, they are still quoting their affidavit verbatim, which is still prohibited under that rule. And I ask that they just paraphrase what they are saying.
So I think that I'm going to allow some leeway. I want to make sure, though, that we do respond to that. And so, Mr. Hellman, if you could just scoot back from your computer.
I can screen share at this time.
It's fine. I understand that some people just remember details in a way that some people don't. But I would just remind you, Dr. Williams, that you are testifying from your own memory and your own perspective rather than from any written materials. Go ahead.
Thank you. So, doctor, based on your previous answer, what are the benefits of Drufo in a fertilizer?
Fertilizers enhance the growth of plants in two ways, either by adding nutrients or by enhancing the effectiveness of the soil by modifying its water retention and aeration. Drufo does both. It is also more friendly to the environment, In the mid-20th century, fertilizer companies started using phosphorus, potassium, magnesium, and zinc in their fertilizers, which increased the production rate up to 800%. However, this led to the problem known as eutrophication.
And what is eutrophication?
In layman's terms, it is a buildup of excessive nutrients in bodies of water caused by agricultural runoff. This causes mass algal blooms, which can kill environments, fish, and can be harmful to humans.
But what's different then about DRUFO?
Well, DRUFO binds with the ingredients in the fertilizer to the plants and grass on which it is sprayed. As a result, less fertilizer needs to be sprayed and less washes away into the soil, thereby interrupting the whole eutrophication process at the very beginning.
And doctor, why do you think few people who have used DRUFO have developed non-Hodgkin lymphoma?
It's simply probability. If you take a large group of people, a small number of them will develop non-Hodgkin lymphoma. That applies to any group of people. So you take a large group of people who have used fertilizers with DRUFO, a small number of them will develop the disease. The data we have analyzed shows that people who use fertilizers with DRUFO have no greater likelihood at developing non-Hodgkin lymphoma as people who use other fertilizers.
And are you familiar with Dr. Casey Rogers' research?
Yes, I am.
And Dr. Casey Rogers' research is contrary to yours. And why do you feel like his studies are improper?
As a true expert in this field, I believe that Dr. Rogers' study should be deemed invalid for numerous reasons. In my last statement, I compared users of fertilizers with DRUFO to users of other fertilizers. This is because you have to compare metaphorically apples to apples in order for a test to be deemed conclusive. Dr. Rogers in his study compared farm laborers to gardeners to people who aren't in those types of jobs.
Doctor, what's wrong with those types of comparisons?
That's comparing apples to oranges. Farm laborers and gardeners are exposed to a variety of different products and environmental conditions that people who aren't in those types of jobs simply don't encounter.
So have they been replicated or peer reviewed?
No, they have not.
And why do things like replication or peer review matter?
The history of science is replete with scientific study results that can never be duplicated. This is because sometimes the one study was a fluke. Sometimes, however, is because the person doing the study was biased. Dr. Rogers' financial career has been focused on finding harmful effects caused by chemical agents. Dr. Rogers' financial bias in this case is far too great for studies to be deemed conclusive.
And doctor, what else did you find to be wrong with Dr. Rogers' analysis?
Scientists have a tendency to tailor and focus on a certain aspects of a study in order to produce or find the desired outcome. This is why in the field of science, we prefer to conduct all of our tests double blind. What this means is a scientist doesn't know which product or test group they're working with. Therefore, they only report the true results. Dr. Rogers, however, did not conduct any of his tests double blind.
So in your expert opinion, was DRUFO the cause of Miss Dakota Weir's development of non-Hodgkin lymphoma?
Absolutely not. There is no doubt that this is an incredibly sad case. It is horrible that the plaintiff has this awful disease. However, I can say with a degree of certainty that DRUFO was not the cause.
Thank you. No further questions at this time, Your Honor.
Counsel for plaintiff, any cross-examination?
Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Williams, you work for Lush, correct?
That is correct.
And Lush Fertilizer chose you to come here and testify today, right?
They did.
About the possible toxicity of DRUFO?
Correct.
And one of the reasons they chose you to come testify was because you've been with the company for a long time, right?
I have over a decade.
Let's talk more about that employment at Lush. You were first hired on as a technician, right?
Correct.
And your job as a technician was to help the lab catch up on any work that they may be behind on, right?
That is true.
So when you were hired, when you were hired on as a technician, you simply helped out in the lab, correct?
Yes.
And later on, you were promoted to actually lead the lab at Lush Fertilizer, right?
Yes, I did very well at my job.
And that was a pretty big promotion, right? From technician to actually leading the lab.
I would say.
Okay. So you say that when you were hired on at Lush, roughly 50% of the original development team for DRUFO had left, correct?
That is correct.
And that was about half your team. So that was a pretty big number, right?
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay. So moving on to Drufo, you spent a little time on direct examination talking about how good it is for the environment, right?
Yes, it is great for the environment.
Okay, but Drufo's banned in the EU, correct?
It is, however, not because of cancer risks.
Yeah, it's banned because of nitrate accumulation, right?
That is true.
Okay, so in order to continue selling Lush products in the EU, Lush took Drufo out of them, right?
That is correct.
Okay, despite it being bad for the environment,
Despite what being bad for the environment?
taking Drufo out of the product.
Taking Drufo out of our product was so that we could sell fertilizers in the EU countries.
Yes, but despite it being bad for the environment, you still took Drufo out of your product to continue selling it, right?
Yes, a company needs to make money.
Because it was just easier.
Yeah, we didn't have the resources to fight the EU's decision at the time.
Yeah, okay, thank you. We can move on. Did you ever hear about the possibility of baking Drufo?
I did hear some things about it, yes.
Okay, but you know that Lush Fertilizer didn't bake Drufo.
I'm aware of that fact, yes.
Okay, let's backtrack just a little bit and go back to that employment. You are a paid employee of Lush Fertilizer, right?
That is correct.
And you work for Blake Doncourt.
Correct.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have no further questions.
Counsel for the defense, do you have any redirect based on that cross?
Yes, Your Honor, very brief.
All right, proceed.
Doctor, what board position do you hold at Lush?
I'm the outgoing chair of the company's ethics committee.
And doctor, how would you say that this position affects your studies and the way you carry yourself at Lush?
Well, this means I conduct all of my studies in the utmost ethical manner.
Objection. Outside of the scope of cross-examination, Your Honor, I never talked about any studies within Lush on my cross-examination.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Yes, briefly.
Whether it's his studies or the way that he carries himself in all manners at Lush, he's an ethical person. So although he said his studies, he also carries himself ethically in terms of whether or not they bake Drufo or the way he spends money or seeks out gaining money.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Yes.
I also never brought up the ethics of Dr. Williams about this. I was simply asking about their employment, and I never brought up ethics at all.
So Dr. Williams' bias was brought up during cross-examination. So I am going to allow questions about positions on the ethics committee. However, the objection is sustained with regard to going into the subject matter or title of any publications. No publications were referenced on cross-examination. So overruled to the extent that he may respond to allegations of bias, sustained to the extent that he may not speak about any specific publications. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. One final question. Would you say that being an ethical person, do you let bias drive you in any way?
I do not know.
Thank you. No further questions.
All right. Any cross-examination or recross, I should say, based upon that redirect?
No, Your Honor.
All right. So Doctor may be excused, Dr. Williams, as a witness in this case. And I believe, if I have my schedule correct, that brings us to closing arguments. So whenever you are ready, if the timekeepers are ready, we are all squared away. Plaintiff, do you care to make a closing argument?
Yes, Your Honor. And at this time, I ask to save any remaining time for rebuttal.
All right. So you're not going to specify a time to save, but rather just remaining time will be saved?
Yes, Your Honor.
I understood. If the timekeepers will please confirm that they can track that for us. All right, you know what? I am directing you. So sorry, the timekeeper had a question in the chat, said, am I directing him? Yes, I am directing the timekeeper to advise us how much time is remaining after the initial closing statement. Counsel, you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Profits over people. Ladies and gentlemen, today you've heard the case of Dakota Wires versus Lush Fertilizer. Today you have seen for yourselves that Lush Fertilizer gave Dakota this terminal illness. Lush ignored the warnings and the worries that were presented to them about this revolutionary product. They had every opportunity to make Drufo safer, yet didn't. Lush was simply unconcerned with the well-being of their loyal and trusted customers. Blake Doncourt, the founder of Lush, this selfish, money-hungry CEO was focused on the profits of the company, not the people. They simply ignored the claims of scientists, the people who wanted to better Drufo. Blake Doncourt was uninterested in protecting the people who trusted Lush. Blake Doncourt simply would rather waste your time boasting about environmental labels than addressing the flaws and their faults of the company. Skylar Wires is a beat journalist with a gambling addiction and a self-taught researcher. With no college degree or formal training in agri-tech, they have brought you no noteworthy or accurate information here today. The twin of Dakota Wires is here in court testifying against them, hoping to get a paycheck. Skylar is more focused on making a profit than caring about their own sibling. Devin Williams has an obvious financial bias in this case, as they are a paid employee of Lush. Their job here today is to make money for Lush, for Blake Doncourt. Devin Williams and their money-focused mindset led them to choose profits over people. Now, Dakota Wires, the horrible victim of this illness, with a perfect life as a busy, involved, and model student, has lost their future because of this company. She never expected to have her life flipped upside down and her dreams torn down by this greedy and thoughtless company who puts profits over people. Members of the jury, I would now like to direct your attention to jury instruction number 3. Please read along silently with me as I read aloud. It quotes, if a manufacturer of a product knows or in the exercise of reasonable care should know that 1, the use of the product may be harmful or injurious to a reasonable user, and 2, that risk of injury is not obvious to a reasonable user, then the manufacturer must use reasonable care to warn the user of risk of harm or injury if a reasonably careful person would under the same or similar circumstances. The failure to do so is negligence. Lush Fertilizer was simply negligent. They chose to put profits over people. Blake Doncourt neglected the allegations of Carson Durst and other scientists who at the time worked for Lush, who expressed their concerns about the safety of Drufo. Blake was the one who made the catastrophic and destructive decision to not bake Drufo, resulting in detrimental consequences. Blake wanted to make a profit for their company, not protect people. Blake and Lush as a whole would rather save a quick buck than save Dakota. Ladies and gentlemen, blame Blake Doncourt. Today, you were presented with rock-hard evidence that Drufo is dangerous. So what makes it acceptable to continue being sold on the market to at-risk and vulnerable people like Dakota Wires? I ask that you find in favor of Dakota Wires, who is asking $15 million in damages against Lush Fertilizer. Members of the jury, it is time that Lush takes responsibility for giving Dakota this horrible illness, and it's time that you, members of the jury, hold them accountable for putting profits over people. Thank you.
And before we move to any closing statement by the defense, if the timekeeper could let us know in the chat by minutes and seconds how much time remains in plaintiffs. Thank you. You beat me to it. Does the defense care to make a closing statement?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, proceed when ready.
Your Honor, members of the jury and opposing counsel, may it please the court, my name is Christopher Dudzik, and I represent Lush Fertilizer, the defendant in this case. We appreciate your attention throughout this matter, and we thank you for listening to both sides equally, as you promised you would do in jury selection. Today, you have heard my opposing counsel and Dakota Weir's negligence claim against Lush Fertilizer. The defense offers every condolence to Dakota for this horrible, horrible disease, but we completely disagree with her claim. We remind you that Dakota Weir's believes the sole cause of her cancer was Lush's failure to properly warn users about the dangers of its product. You have seen that the plaintiff claims and statements are full of neglect and grave irresponsibility. Now, after hearing all of the evidence from both sides, it is apparent that the only reasonable verdict to be returned is that of not liable. A great thing to keep in mind all throughout life is irresponsibility has grave consequences. This case is the perfect example of that. Dakota Weir's testified to great negligence in that she refused to wear any protective clothing. Havens, as a company, was irresponsible when they did not enforce upon their employees the following of the safety guidelines on Lush's label. No evidence has proven that Drufo or Lush caused Dakota's condition. Today, you heard from the plaintiff herself, Dakota Weirs, and I want to try to paint a picture of Dakota Weir's statement. She testified that the sole cause of her development of non-Hodgkin lymphoma is due to her use of Lush Fertilizer. However, she admitted that she was told to cover her face and wear long clothes when she worked with chemicals. She chose comfortability when she was specifically warned and told by her boss to wear protective clothing. Although it may have been hot, Lush isn't responsible for enforcing the guidelines they set. For example, a car manufacturing company wouldn't be responsible for injuries that a driver of one of their cars suffered if they weren't wearing a seatbelt. The adult knew they should wear a seatbelt, but chose comfort over safety and reason. The same has happened with Dakota Weirs. She knew the proper safety procedures and still chose to neglect them. She has also testified to her usage and exposure with many other chemicals and lawn care products throughout her life. She also heard from the lead product developer for Terrace Greenery, Carson Durst. Carson testified that she worked her way up fast within Lush, but she also stated that Lush hired her right after college within ASU. She's also testified that she had such a close relationship with the Doncourts all throughout her life. You must ask, is this because of bias or any sort of previous relationship? She spoke of her role in regard to the development of Drufo. She said that she had speculation of foul play within Lush, and she had these major suspicions for months, but made absolutely no attempt to contact any sort of healthcare official, government agency, or any sort of law enforcement. She wasn't qualified for her high-ranking position, and therefore, she was put on a performance improvement plan. Before she was even fired from Lush Fertilizer, she was already looking for a job with Lush's competitor. Why? Because she knew she wasn't qualified, and her coworkers were starting to find that out. When she was fired, she said herself that she was seething with the Doncourts and with Lush. She currently works for Terrace Greenery, Lush's biggest competitor. And due to her confidentiality agreement, she has no way to retaliate towards Lush Fertilizer or the Doncourts. But this case is the perfect opportunity for her to take a stance against these people she was and still is so upset with. She childishly turned this case into a personal grudge match with the intent of getting back at Blake and Lush while also convicting her biggest competitor. This case is overflowing with irresponsibility from the side of the plaintiff. The plaintiff is responsible to prove it is more likely than not that its fertilizer caused cancer. They needed to provide a preponderance of evidence that Lush is at fault for the allegations brought forth today. Seeing that how that was not done, and based on all of the evidence brought forth, the only reasonable verdict to be returned is that of not liable. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. For the plaintiff, there are two different times reported. One is 1:13 and one is 1:16. We're going to call it 1:14 because of the lag. So proceed when you're ready.
Thank you, Your Honor. Members of the jury, we as the plaintiff representing Dakota Weirs in this case have proven to you beyond the preponderance of the evidence today that Lush Fertilizer is negligent. I now direct your attention to jury instruction number 2. We have proven to you beyond the preponderance of the evidence that elements 1, 3, and 4 are not in question. It is up to you to decide if element 2 has been proven or not. Skylar Weirs said today that Drufo has multiple carcinogenic properties in it, yet they still consider it safe. They also agreed to the statement that they were testifying on the side that gave Dakota cancer. You're really going to believe two people who work for Lush themselves and a 20-year-old who is a self-taught researcher. Irresponsibility has grave consequences. Irresponsibility of selfish and greedy companies like Lush Fertilizer. They're the reason we are here today. They're at fault for giving Dakota cancer. Their carelessness and irresponsibility caused the grave consequences. Dakota Weirs, this talented, bright young adult, has had their life ruined by Lush Fertilizer, who puts profits over people. Hold them accountable. Thank you.
Thank you. And that will conclude. We will turn the case over to the jury. So I want to thank everyone. We will come back for comments shortly. I do want to take just a few minutes to allow the panelists to finish their scoring. I'm going to put my computer on mute, but leave my video open, and when I come back on, we'll open the floor for comments. Thank you. Back in just a few minutes.
Jeff, are you close to done, or should we have them do their comments? Oh, you're muted. You're muted.
I just submitted.
Perfect. All right, you guys are good to go.
Great. See you tomorrow morning.
All right, if you guys want to do comments, I don't know if you want to do comments.
I don't want to do it. I don't need to do any comments.
Okay.
Okay. All right, thank you, Jeff.
Yeah.
Kathy, do you have any comments if you want to go first?
I think my first comment is to thank everyone for all their work on this case. I mean, it really was amazing to watch how you develop the fact patterns. And I mean, I really have I'm seriously, you did a very, very nice job. And I think everything flowed extremely well. I just have a couple comments on some things that are just little polishing things. One thing is to be careful to not comment on the testimony you just received. And it's easy to do that. If you like the answer that you got, it's really nice to, the first thing that comes to your mind is to say, all right, or correct, or whatever. Be careful on not doing that. Just let their answer be on the record, let that lie, and not feel like you need to comment on it. I saw some really nice impeachment, particularly from plaintiff's side. I think Raven, you had done that. That worked out extremely well. There are a couple places where you won a hard fought objection, and then didn't follow up with the question that you had just been successful in generating the court's decision. So just again, be sure that you've completed everything that you started on that point. The other thing, and this one I know we all teach you to write your closing in advance, so that you make sure that you hit all those points. But you also need to make sure that the points you believe you hit actually were hit. And be careful on, say, quoting something that you thought was going to be testimony that didn't come into testimony, or something that you thought the witness was going to say necessarily didn't come in. But like I said, those are all just little, almost nitpicky points to really polish your presentation. But I mean, you've hit all the very basic, and the basic skills you've got down. You're working on some really advanced skills. I think you're doing a great job. And we've lost Judge Lake there temporarily. Do any of the students have questions while we're waiting on Judge Lake?
All right, my apologies. I just had something to address. I will tell you all, first of all, thank you for this particular time. I was able to miss a happy hour that I did not want to go to. And so I was actually really glad to be on a Zoom call with all of you. And that's actually true, but I signed up for this because I really enjoy working with students, and all of you were no exception. I thought that you were all excellent. I thought you were remarkably well prepared. It's nitpicking at this point because really you've come in here ready to go. The only thing that I would suggest going forward is, as Kathy mentioned, following up on, or referring to statements in your closing that were made during actual testimony is good. I know that you can't always do that. Sometimes your prepared questions and your prepared witnesses don't go exactly as you thought they would. And I thought that you flowed with those well. In responding to your objections, obviously my bias in a competition is to let testimony in, but I will tell you that I did really think about your objections. I thought they were well considered. I thought they were well made, and your ability to adjust on the fly to my commentary, that was excellent. I think the only thing, if I could suggest, is sometimes when we get going in a question and answer, especially in cross-examination, we tend to have verbal tics where someone will answer and will say something like, okay, and then, or, kind of acknowledging the response and then moving in, or all right is one that's often used. A transcript, if you become lawyers, a transcript of your first deposition will show you that you're doing that. You don't have that here, so I'm just telling you. Just something to be mindful of, just a fine point. Yeah, as I said, otherwise, I think it was really very good. And beyond specific coaching, I don't have any glaring issues that I would want to raise. I will tell you that I had a problem allowing the proposed expert testimony, and I actually asked, do I have to let that in? But of course, the answer is yes. That's the way it's written. So I thought you did a nice job arguing both for and against allowing that testimony. It's something I was paying particular attention to, and it's an important issue in real litigation. So I wanted to call that out specifically because I really was paying close attention to it. You both did a nice job on both sides.
And Johanna she got bumped off, so she apologized, but she said y'all did a great job and Jeff had to leave. So I think we're done with comments. I just want to thank everybody, particularly our judges and scoring panelists, for all of your time. You don't need to do this, but it makes everything so much better for these kids. So I really appreciate it. And you guys all did an amazing job.
Good work, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
You're welcome.
All right, everybody have a good night, and we'll see you bright and early.